Today we're looking at the genetic trail of the Exodus. Let's first talk about when the Exodus occurred. In 1 Kings 6:1, it states that the Exodus occurred 440 years before the construction of the Temple of Solomon began, in the 4th year of his reign, which was calculated to be 966 BCE. Now, I'd like to point out that the 440 that I'm using here is taken from the Septuagint translation. The Masoretic text references 480, but the Septuagint is more accurate because of the fact that it was translated from the original text, while the Masoretic was not. And so when there's a discrepancy like this, best to use the Septuagint rather than the Masoretic. So 440 from 966 brings us to 1406 BCE. That was during the reign of Amenhotep II. And they would have arrived in Israel 40 years later, around 1366 BCE. Now, the Merneptah Stele's reference to the people of Israel, which was dated around 1208 BCE, there's some sites reference 1213 BCE as the date, but close enough around that time. The reference makes reference to the fact that Israel, the people, were politically, they were powerful enough to be worthy of the Egyptians attempting to conquer them. So we can assume that by that date, the Israelites were well established in the land. And so that supports a 1406 BCE Exodus because, with them getting there 1366 BC or around that point, by 1208, BCE, they would have, been well established. So let's keep this year in mind, 1406 BCE for the beginning of the Exodus and 1366 approximately for the arrival into Israel. Before I get into what I want to show you, as a reminder, I'm showing here on the screen a migration map for haplogroup E that was created by Family Tree DNA. There are a lot of DNA companies out there. That one, I would consider them pioneers in terms of YDNA research, and YDNA is the DNA you get from your father. The migration map shown here shows how the haplogroup E population migrated from the original starting point, and you can see that they go through through Egypt and then to Israel. And of all the haplogroups, they're the only haplogroup that shows this migration going south to north from Egypt to Israel. Now, I'll say like every other DNA company, they're still collecting data. So the full set of the migration isn't necessarily captured, and they don't, generally, they're not good at capturing backwards migration. You'll see up at Morocco, they captured a piece of it, but generally speaking, so let's say a population goes north and then south, they wouldn't capture that backward migration back south, or for example, if the population goes across to Arabia and then back, those types of backwards migrations generally are not captured very well. But the purple line that you see here is basically what they call Y atom, the original haplogroup. So all population groups start out from the same point. Historically, it's been said that, human existence, human life started, or the Garden of Eden was in East Africa. What this updated DNA research is showing is that it was actually in the Niger-Congo River Basin area. So I'm only showing the haplogroup E migration map here, but every single one of them start out with that purple line that you're seeing there, and then eventually the genetic mutations result in the various other haplogroups after haplogroup A. Anything after haplogroup A is the result of a genetic mutation. So I'm just giving this as a sort of background here. On this slide here, I'm showing the ancestral path of the E1B1A haplogroup, E1B1A being a subclad of haplogroup E. Back in October of last year, I did a video proving that the genetic profile of the Israelites is the paternal haplogroup E1B1A. You can take a look at that video for more details on that. Here, what I'm showing is the ancestral path going from haplogroup E to E1B1A, and then downstream of E1B1A for my own YDNA haplogroup. So I'm E1B1A, but specifically these subclads downstream of E1B1A. And just as a recap, I have here all of the tribes in Africa with that E1B1A haplogroup, and these tribes all have some portion of the tribe with oral history of Israelite ancestry. And in some cases, it's a meaningful percentage of the tribe who've retained that oral history. In some cases, it's just a very tiny percentage. But either way, the one commonality with all of these tribes is that E1B1A haplogroup. This simulation from Family Tree DNA shows the genetic progression from haplogroup A or Y atom, the oldest haplogroup in existence. It shows how that progresses from that haplogroup to your haplogroup. And when it gets to your haplogroup, it then shows a dark purple line showing a migration corridor of the migration history of your haplogroup. So take a look at what happens. Look at the time below, the timeline and year below. Purple line, look at what happens when it... Okay, so you'll see we're now at 1300 BCE, and that line went from Egypt one period prior to Israel, that dark purple line in 1300 BCE. That is the exact time frame of the Exodus. And for those who are not aware, at the top there of the map is where Egypt and Israel is. I'll show a modern map on the next slide for comparison. But this is clear evidence that the migration that's called the Exodus was partaken of by people with E1B1A haplogroup. You can see that those people also migrated into Europe, Arabia and then Europe very, very early on, even prior to 1 BCE. And then after 1 BCE, there was an explosion. We know that there were two captivities, the Syrian captivity and as well as the Babylonian captivity. And then after the destruction of the Second Temple, there was even more of a scattering, and many of those people scattered to Europe and other places as well. But this is definitive evidence of the genetic indicators or trail showing what the genetic profile of the people who were part of that exodus from Egypt to Israel are. And it's E1B1A. And by the way, the simulation does not show the backward migration that occurred when this population of Israelites moved back south into and then west into West Africa. Scientists typically refer to that as the Bantu migration, but it was actually the migration of Israelites. I'll cover that in another video. For this video, what you see on the screen here is a part of a research paper prepared by Dr. Tama Clark, PhD, in which she basically pointed out that as the main thesis of this research, that the history of Judaism, and this is Judaism by the people who identify as being Jewish, is that there's no hereditary relation between the Jewish people and the biblical Hebrews, and that there's no empirical evidence that they're Semitic. I particularly like the sentence below that thesis statement there, which says that absent ancient Hebrew theology, custom, and dogma, Judaism as a religion and a people would have never existed. That is, the Jewish people's existence is predicated upon that of the Israelites, but the same is not conversely true. And I'll leave it at that. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share.